just brief introduction, who you are and where you are, and maybe either quick about what you're doing or what your interest in this subject is. So I'll start. I'm Tim, and I know most people on the call, but I work part-time for a social enterprise called Wessex Community Assets, and that has sort of led us into the field of community energy. And through that work, I'm involved in Dorset Community Energy and a little bit Energy Local Bridport, and very peripherally with the Bridport co-housing project as well. So that's me. Ali, you want to go next?
Thank you, Tim. Hello. Yes, I'm Alison. I'm down in Dorset as well, south of England. I'm a colleague of Tim's with Dorset Community Energy, so I'm a member and director of Dorset Community Energy, and also I worked with Pete, who you'll meet, to set up the Energy Local Report project, and so that's what we're going to be. I'm here really to share a bit about that with you today, but lovely to see you all.
Pete?
Yeah, so like Ali, I've known Tim for a long time. I think we together started Dorset Community Energy in 2013, and that basically, pardon me, helped set up Energy Local Bridport in 2019, basically to supply local people with locally generated renewable electricity at a lower cost. So it's like trying to make it a more equal market for people, for householders.
Monica.
Right, so I joined Bridport Co-housing in 2009. I had recently retired, so I've spent the last 14 and a half years on this project. In co-housing, frequently, and certainly historically, it has been older people that have started these projects because that they don't have to go to work and they have an income. It may be small or whatever, but nonetheless, you know, they have some agency in how they spend their time. And this was what I decided that I wanted to do, because I think the co-housing is a really good way forward for a healthy living in the future. And so we always wanted to be a low energy co-housing, but it was the work of, and I have to say I'm not 100% sure of the relationship between all the various local groups that are facilitating energy for us in Bridport, but I'm grateful to the people that are, because as a result we have now got a huge Tesla battery on site, and we even impressed the local sustainability people when we told them how big our battery was. I mean, I'm not one to be proud about bigness in itself, but nonetheless, it is a genuine contribution to the whole ongoing development of locally generated electricity and its relationship with the grid. So this is just up my street, this stuff we're talking about today.
Great, thank you. Elisa.
Hi everyone, I'm Elisa. I'm in Bristol right now. I'm originally from Brazil, and I'm doing a PhD here in Bristol, in the University of Bristol. I'm investigating the cooperatives of the landless workers in Brazil. Yeah, that's it.
Fernanda.
Well, I'm also from Brazil, and I guess I'm just curious. Not at the moment working particularly with communities, although always interested in doing so.
Thank you. And Sean, we're just going around just introducing ourselves and saying who we are, where we are, and maybe what we're doing.
Yeah, sorry for bringing it up. I'm currently based in Norwich, if you guys see me. Sorry for
Oh, your sound is a bit distorted. I don't know.
Is that better?
Yeah. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm Sean, and I'm a PhD student at the University of East Anglia in Norwich, UK. And I'm researching with a project based in Hull, which is a kind of community and direct democracy and solidarity economy project. So I'm kind of here out of curiosity and time and interest.
Thank you. Elena, do you want to say something about where you are and the work you're doing?
Sure, yeah, hi. Elena again. I'm calling from Trondheim in Norway. And since land acknowledgements are popular these days, it's the land of the Southern Sami people, shared with cultural Norwegians. And I'm doing my PhD here at the University of Science and Technology, NTNU. And I work on the side of my PhD a lot with food sharing and food-based commons. And I'm really curious to see the similarities and differences and hear your story with energy.
Right, thank you. Patricia, hi. We were just going around just doing a quick introduction, who you are and where you are and, I don't know, an interest or not. Oh, you're muted.
I'm in France at the moment, but I'm English. And I know Tim because we worked together at Schumacher College, and I've been really interested in the whole question of how we think differently about economies. I've been involved with a research group around the world who are involved in all sorts of projects about alternative ways of organizing and working. And so I've also been supervising Tim on his PhD thesis and really wanted to hear you talk today about your work in this setting.
And thank you. Okay, so the plan for today is we're going to start with 3 short presentations about what's going on in Bridport. I think Bridport, I should say, it's a small town on the coast, 15,000 people, and some really interesting community economy activity going on. And I think energy is one of those areas where some really interesting activity has arisen. So I'm going to talk about Dorset Community Energy just for 5 minutes or so. Ali is going to talk about Energy Local Bridport, and Monica is going to talk about the co-housing projects, microgrid, and also the passive house systems that they have for the housing. Yeah, and then, you know, obviously, if there are questions during that, we'll open that up for questions. And then I just want to raise a question about if we were going to do research together, and together, I'll talk about who that together might be. Yeah, what form might that research take? And I think it was kind of sparked by a couple of things, really. One is that with Dorset Community Energy, as I'll explain, we've managed to raise money and put PV onto schools and hospitals and community buildings, but it's kind of like a technical solution, and it's hard for people to sort of engage with that technology. It is a commons, but it's hard to say that there's a community that's involved in sort of ongoing processes of commoning. So that's one thing. With Energy Local Bridport, I think there's more opportunities for that because it gets people kind of closer to their energy use. And then I think with the co-housing project, even more so, actually, because there's 53 houses that have a microgrid. They're generating their own electricity. They have passive houses, but they also have quite a complicated, as Monica will say, technological sort of system within the houses, and getting to grips with those from conversations that I've had with the new residents has been quite a challenge. And so I think that there's a real kind of learning opportunity. And I think a lot of others could learn from that sort of learning opportunity. So that's kind of like the context, really. So I'll jump straight in. I'll share screen, and then because of the sort of limits of technology, I've also got Ali's few slides and a few slides for Monica as well. And so there'll be a bit of clunky next slide, please, but you just have to forgive that. So I'll share my screen and I'll kind of go through the session. Okay. So can everyone see the screen? Not that I can see you, but yeah, everyone can see the screen. Great. Okay. Sorry. There's always a challenge at the beginning of these sessions, isn't there? Sorry, for some reason it's not moving on. I'll just try again. Okay, so Dorset Community Energy. So basically, Pete and I, we set this up in 2013. We'd had some support from a grant that was sort of to do with making communities more resilient. Anyway, it's a Community Benefit Society, which is a particular kind of English structure of social enterprise, which is a good way of raising money, but it's also very democratic. So we chose that that sort of approach or that structure for setting it up. It's part of a wider field of community energy in the UK, which has been growing quite rapidly over the last 10 years. And this was a slide that I just picked up from Community Energy England. So you can see it's sort of generating, community energy initiatives are generating quite a lot of electricity. One of the challenges, I think, is that we use terminology like megawatts or kilowatts and gigawatts, which very few people know what that actually means, I think. I'm very hazy on it. And also, with these community energy societies, so there are 58,000 members, according to this, and 217,000 people engaged. But I have no idea what that really means, that people are engaged. So again, that's the sort of thing that we'd like to get to grips with a bit. So before saying a bit more about Dorset Community Energy, I just wanted to highlight a few of the sort of questions that have come to me when thinking about this. And so this conference is part of the Community Economy Research Network. And that work was begun by a couple of scholars called Julie Graham and Catherine Gibson. And in one of their books, they said that we need to develop a politics of possibility. And they said that a politics of possibility, you can kind of break it down into a politics of language, a politics of subjectivity, and a politics of collective action. So when I was thinking about this session, I was thinking, well, when we start to think about language, even the term energy is not something that people understand well. I mean, before the session, I kind of did a bit of research into, well, what actually does energy mean? Because I didn't have a clue, and yet I've been involved in it for 10 years or so. And then secondly, there's a lot of technical language around energy, which often, I think, confuses people rather than makes things clearer. And then Gibson Graham came up with this term capitalocentrism, that we tend to think of things often in terms of the way that sort of capitalism presents it. And so in relation to energy, I think we're kind of led to believe that energy is just this commodity, and we as users are passive consumers. So basically we get our energy from an energy company, and then we kind of pay the money and we forget about it. So we're very passive in relation to it. And so are there ways that we could shift the language that we use around energy? And then the question is, if we do start to use a different language, gain an understanding of energy, can that actually shift our sense of what we're able to do individually and collectively in relation to energy? So that's a shift potentially in subjectivity. So Gibson Graham talk about a kind of a politics of subjectivity, because actually we're not encouraged to be active in relation to energy. And the other side of this is that if we're thinking about shifting our subjectivity, can we also consider not just things from a sort of very human-centered point of view, but actually energy is, there's a kind of entanglement of human but also non-human elements, such as the technical stuff, the grids and the batteries, but also things like the sun or the wind as well. So then that leads on into, well, what are the forms of collective action that we might then engage in? So how might we work with others around decision making, about getting the resources to do energy generation together, for example? How do we just develop very basic processes of becoming more energy aware and confident? So those are the kind of questions that I wanted to sort of begin as a kind of framing for the session. And before I go on to Dorset Community Energy, just raising a bit more of this question, what is energy? So I did a bit of a Google search, and it says energy is something that makes a change, and making a change is called doing work. So energy is therefore the ability to do work. And then something I probably learned in physics, but I'd completely forgotten. So there's energy in the universe, and it's constant. So it can't be made, it can't be destroyed. There's the same amount of energy. But when we use energy, we turn it from one type of energy into another type of energy. So you can then think of lots of different types of energy. So, you know, today we'll talk about solar energy or heat energy, for example, mechanical energy. And so when we're using energy, we're changing it from one form of energy to another. So, for example, when coal is burned, its energy is changed into heat and light. Or, for example, when the energy of the wind hits a wind turbine and it turns, it creates electricity, which can then be used, for light or heat or whatever. So that's a kind of a sort of an initial thing, which maybe everybody knows that, but I was kind of became conscious that actually I didn't really think about energy or what it is at all. And then this was another thing that, as I kind of delved into this a bit more, so the chart on the left sort of shows how our use of energy has obviously increased over time, as one could imagine. And the diagram on the chart on the right shows how unequal across the world our use of energy is. And there's this statistic that if we get to a world population of 10 billion, which is what's predicted, and all countries matched the present consumption of the US, then the world energy demand would eventually increase nearly fivefold. But we're being told that if we continue to use energy in the way that we're using it, particularly carbon-based energies, then there's actually no future for the planet. So this is quite a critical issue, I think. The last couple of things I wanted to share on this sort of line is that there's some interesting research I found by Elizabeth Shove, who said that we need to remember that people don't use energy for its own sake. It's always used to help us do something at home or at work or traveling around. So we use energy for heating or for cooling or for lighting. And that if you look historically, these practices of using energy have been changing all the time. And so she then presented this, which I think is quite interesting. So on the left, you have houses from 50 odd years ago, and you can sort of see, for example, they had a solid fuel fire, or they only had a couple of electricity points downstairs. And I haven't got an updated one, but even sort of moving 25 years on, you can see how the layout of houses has completely changed. The increase in electricity points, the different types of heating systems being used, the fact that instead of baths, people had showers. So I just thought this was a really interesting to sort of think about the way that energy is being used differently historically. And obviously one can also think about the way that energy is used differently during the day at different periods, and also during the year, summer versus winter. So it has interesting rhythms as well to it. Okay, so that was a bit of background about energy, which, as I say, everyone may know, but I just found it quite interesting just to sort of delve into energy a little bit. So just to say a little bit about Dorset Community Energy. So we got this funding. We set up this new Community Benefit Society. It's a form of cooperative, so it's a one-member, one-vote organisation. Our initial target was 6 installations. And basically the idea was that we would raise money through a share offer. And that money that members put in is then repaid over 20 years, and they get 5.5% interest. And the host building, whether it's a school or a hospital or a community village hall, for example, would then get either low cost or free electricity. And so to date, Dorset Community Energy, we have 28 installations, over 200 members. We've raised about £1 million from community shares, and we have 1.5 megawatt of installed capacity. And as I say, we do these share offers, and basically through these share offers, we invite people, we say what we're going to do, and present sort of financial models, and people have been happy to put money in. We've managed to get some grant to support the installations, and also that the early ones had something called feed-in tariff, which supported them as well. That's the sort of spread of installations across Dorset. So from Bridport in the west of the county right across to Bournemouth in the east. And these are just some local examples around Bridport of some of the installations that we've done in schools and on the hospital, at the arts centre, and a village hall. And I won't go into these figures, but one of the critical ones, if you look down, it says saved by client sites. And so in the time that we've been operational, since 15-16, our first installation, we've saved our various partners nearly £500,000 in their energy bills through the installations that we've put on. And we also, we create a surplus over time. And that's because every year we hand back a 20th of what they put in for 20 years. And so we're paying interest. It's a bit complicated, but basically we're paying interest on a smaller cumulative amount each year. And so we then build up a surplus, which we put into a community fund. And by the end of the current installations, we will have a community fund that will have dispersed, you can see the red bit at the bottom, over £500,000 to a variety of local projects that we support through our community fund as well. Okay, so whoops, I'm just going to stop sharing for a second, and I just wanted to first of all see if there were any questions about Dorset Community Energy, but also whether Pete wanted to say a little bit about the kind of educational work that you've done in schools. I know that Ali has also done some of that work.
Well, yeah, I think Ali and myself jointly, and we've always thought it important to, for example, if a school's got solar panels on the roof, it's important that the children would learn about that, but also about saving energy. So, for example, when there's solar panels on the roof, there's usually we try to install a screen in the entrance to the school so they can see how much solar electricity is being generated, but also they can see how much electricity is used in the school in real time. So that, for example, pupils can turn off computers when not in use, and they can actually see the reduction in energy. So it's basically using the solar panels as a tool to help children, which I think is very, very important. I mean, I find it very hard to get my mind in the mind of a young person, but, you know, I think it must be extremely destabilizing, really, to think that we've got this problem that could mean the end of everything within their own lifetime. So it's to try and create positive visions for the future, that the technologies are possible, they're affordable. It's just a matter of that we should be able to do it, and that, yeah, as you have done it in your school. So we've also got little models that children can build, and I like to keep it relatively simple, not really particularly to dwell on climate change. So we have these models of a little disc that spins around with a solar panel, and the children put their hands on it and make it go faster and slower. And that thing is really cool. And in some of the best examples, we've had children interested in this, and the older pupils, maybe 8 or 9 year olds, then run a class for the 5 and 6 year olds in the same school. So it's children teaching children. And yeah, anyway, it's the sort of thing personally I just think it's important for the future. And yeah, just to try and make people aware that there are affordable solutions. It's just we've got to do it. That's really. Ali might want to say something because she's done more than me. She was the Eco-Schools officer with the council.
Ali, would you like to?
You summed it up. Oh, sorry, thanks. You know, quite well, Pete. I think we were really keen that, you know, children didn't get the impression, oh, there's some solar panels on my school, so we've got all the energy we need. It's okay to waste it. So kind of being able to sort of demonstrate the flows of energy within the school was really, we thought was really important. And actually using solar panels is a great way to demonstrate that principle that Tim talked about, that energy is converted from one type to another. Because with solar panels, you can't really see much happening. But then you plug something in and you can. And so, because I think it's actually a great way to demonstrate to children that light is energy. And even if it's a dull day, they can, you know, energy can be transferred from light energy into electrical power, and they can see the outcomes of that.
Right. So Ali, would you see if the technology will work? Would you like to talk a bit about Energy Local? I'll get the slides up on screen.
Brilliant. Yeah,
if I can.
Yeah, and actually, so Pete was the Energy Local Report project, I'll just say, is a project that Dorset Community Energy took on, but Pete here was really the instigator. And actually, Pete, I wondered, could you just say why you were interested in Energy Local? Like, what led you to find Energy Local? You know, what's the problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah, Ali, the thing was, in the UK, nearly all these hundreds of community energy projects that Tim mentioned, including Dorset Community Energy, were installing solar panels on the roof of buildings, and the buildings were benefiting, but there was no impact on the wider community. And I think we came to a bit of a pause there's this end of this government feed-in tariff, which supported very low-cost electricity to the buildings. We're looking for new opportunities. And in the UK, there was a new project which was just starting to supply individual householders with local renewable energy. And this is slightly different to Monica's example, which she'll explain in a minute, about a microgrid. This was using the existing grid. So basically, the renewable energy is metered and supplied to householders who have a smart meter, and they can actually purchase the renewable electricity from a local generator at lower cost. And Energy Local Bridport was actually the first example in England of this particular local supply.
Yeah, thank you, Pete. Yeah, so I think the key thing about Energy Local is Dorset Community Energy were very aware that, you know, we've got these solar panels on schools and community buildings, but we can either sell that electricity to an energy supply company, or we can give it for free to the host building, the people using the building. But beyond that, there was no way to get the benefits of there being a community-owned, you know, renewable asset, you know, as part of the community. You know, the benefits are quite limited. It's the people in the building or the Dorset Community Energy investors. So Pete was looking around for other ways that we can share the benefits of community, particularly community-owned, but renewable energy, and came across Energy Local. So Energy Local is basically is a community interest company. So they're based in Wales. They're a not-for-profit, and what they've done is they've developed, like Pete said, they've developed a way of a structure and a model that allows local trading of renewable power. So it's something communities can do. It needs the backup of a licensed supply company. So Energy Local have got a relationship with Octopus Energy, who are a big supply company, but one of the main ones in the UK now, and also another company called 100 Green, who are a very deep green energy company. So they kind of Energy Local partner with these two energy companies, and the partnership allows them to form these Energy Local clubs, which basically, in a nutshell, trade locally generated renewable power between the generator and local consumers of that renewable energy. So Energy Local themselves, they're a national company. They're working across the UK to try and set up Energy Local clubs in different areas. And like Pete said, Bridport was the first Energy Local club in England, and the first to use a wind turbine as the generator. So actually, if you could move the slide on for me, please, Tim, thank you. So just to kind of give the background of what an Energy Local club is, it's something that works on a really local scale. So you have a generator of renewable energy. So we've got a wind turbine, but other Energy Local clubs are set up with hydro schemes and a few with solar farms as well. So you have a generator of energy, and you get a community of consumers who are close by. And there is a geographical limit that we can talk about, but who are close by to that generator of power. It's all supported by one of these energy companies. So the renewable energy generator will have an export contract with, say, Octopus, and all of the people in the community who want to use the power will also have Octopus as their supplier. So it's kind of bundled together by everybody being in a contract with the same energy provider. And basically everyone has a smart meter. So a really, really key thing to this setup is that if you're a consumer of energy and you're in the Energy Local club, you have a smart meter that can track every half hour how much power you're generating. And the generator of power has the same, also has half-hourly smart metering, so they know every half hour chunk how much they're exporting. And that allows them to be matched, basically. So the households and the generators, they come together, they form a cooperative, that's the legal framework. And together they agree a match price, what we call a match tariff, which is the price that the local power can be sold for within the Energy Local club. So it's kind of done fairly democratically in discussion between the generator and the consumers of the power. And the idea is that the price is cheaper than what the consumers would normally be able to get through the market, through the regular grid system. But it's also gives a better deal for the generator. So the ideal outcome of an energy local club is that consumers can get cheaper power, but the local generator can earn a bit more for their power. And that's solving one of the problems that we were coming up against with Dorset Community Energy as the government subsidies for renewables were coming around. And so what's really interesting is if you're a member of an energy local club, you get a special tariff. So all the consumers, they have got this special kind of two-part tariff. They can, if the renewable generator is generating, so this is the report tariff, this is from 2020, but if it's generating, they can pay the local match price for a share of that renewable power. So in this example, the match price, if the wind turbine is generating, the members of the club can pay 9.5p a kilowatt for their energy. What they also get is they get a time of use tariff, which is the second part to the tariff. And that is for any power that they might use that doesn't match with the wind turbine generation. So on a day when it's not windy, if a lull in the wind, or if the wind turbine is just not generating enough to cover the whole club demand, they get this time of use tariff for the rest of their power. And that tariff is designed to, you can see the evening peak, the high price in 23p in the evening. That represents the cost and the environmental impact of generating power at that time. That's when all the energy companies have a big spike in their demand. So the time of use tariff is incentivizing members to shift their electricity consumption to times when there is power is cheaper and it's more readily available. So as a member of a club, you've got this kind of double whammy incentive. You can try and match what you're using to when your local generator is generating, and you can also try and shift your demand to times when power is more abundant. And so they've got this, which can lead hopefully to better value for the members. So they can save money if they can do one or both of those two things. So I've just shown you, yeah, brilliant. So these are the tariffs from Bridport. They have changed a little bit, but the idea is that the principle is still the same. Consumers, by shifting their power to match the turbine output, can save. The wind turbine will earn a little bit better from having the energy local club to sell their power to. So yeah, Tim, the next one, please. Thank you. So this is all facilitated by some technology that the consumer members will have. So everyone gets access to a consumer dashboard, and the purpose is to help them visualize when the renewable power is going to be available, how much is going to be available, and how their consumption is going to, match with that or not. So this is just an example from Report. The high blue profile is the output of the wind turbine. And then the lower profile with the multicolours, that's the club consumption of electricity. So you can see there's a kind of roughly regular pattern. The total club consumption power that all those 50 households use is in that jagged profile at the bottom. And then sometimes there's loads and loads of wind, other times there isn't. So what this is kind of showing the members that there is how much power there is going to be to share out between them. And I think that's the really key thing here when we're talking about commons, and that awareness of what's available and how each household can play their part in that. So they get a forecast so they can see, it's going to be really, so in this example, it's going to be really windy, or the weather forecast is going to be quite windy in the next couple of days. And there's going to be plenty of wind available. So, club members might then be able to choose to shift their behaviour to use more electricity over the next couple of days when they know they'll be able to match their power with the wind energy. Next one, please, Tim. Part of helping the consumer members match their power use, obviously they've got to be able to understand what their power use in the house is, which appliances use a lot of energy, which ones don't, when in the day they're using these things. So the consumer dashboard for each member gives them this kind of a screen like this one. So this is an example of a real-time output, real-time electricity demand for a house. in the club. So members can look at this and they can see, over the course of the day, when their energy, is being consumed. When they're using the most energy, they can match that. They can then think back and try and match that to the appliances they've been using in the house and work out what they might be able to shift, what they need on at all times, what they might be able to shift. So that next slide, please, Tim. So they can track what's using power in their house and when, and they also get to break down in the dashboard of what proportion of their electricity use they've managed to match to the local generation. So this is a really nice example from a customer. They've got, so in both of these circles, the blue is power that's been matched to the wind turbine. So it's power that they paid the match price for. So on this particular fortnight, this consumer member has used about kind of 75% of their power. They've managed to match that with the wind output, and they can see a breakdown of when else in the day they're using their power. So consumers are getting feedback about what they're doing. They're getting tools to help them understand and break down their power use. An interesting discussion I know that maybe Tim might like to have is about engagement with the dashboard. So some members use the dashboard a lot, taking the information that's there, and they're really using it as a tool to help them shift what they're doing. And other people don't, might not even have looked at it, or might use it once or twice and get the idea and don't come back to it. So it's an interesting tool. It's an interesting thing to develop, I think. And then just the statistics roughly for our club at the moment. Yeah, my members are saving about 12% a year on their bills compared to what they would pay outside of an energy club on a normal energy tariff. And we think the club are matching about 40% of their electricity demand to the local generation. So, still effectively buying the 60% on a normal tariff, but about 40% is matched to the wind turbine. And I think that again is quite interesting. I think the key thing about the members that I've noticed is they've got a real sense of being connected to the wind turbine. There's no physical infrastructure that's changed for them. They're still actually connected, supplied by the local grid. They can have as much electricity as they want in their houses. They can use whatever they want. But because they know they're part of a club and there's one turbine that's producing a limited amount of power at one time, I think the members, I don't know if you agree, Pete, but the members have got this kind of notional idea that they are sharing something that's not infinite, and that they do adjust their behavior to try and fit in and not take more than they feel they deserve, or they're entitled to as part of the club. And just lastly, again, the members do feel like they're part of something, even though they're all just participating in their houses at home. So we do get together. We've had a few social events, and we've also been trying to kind of pioneer some sort of, or to try and implement some kind of peer-to-peer learning about the dashboard. So we've got a couple of members who are very strong on using the dashboard, and we've been trying to, develop situations where they can meet with other members and demonstrate what they're doing, what's working for them, what's not, and support them, other members, to get more involved, more actively involved with managing their own electricity demand. I don't know if, Pete, there's anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'll just stop share, and if there's any questions as well that people have as well.
No, that's really comprehensive, Ali. Nothing to add here.
But there's a question from Daniel in the chat. I don't know if you want to ask the question or sort of summarize it.
Yeah, thank you. It's super interesting, everything that everyone said so far, so thank you. I'm really interested in these community energy projects as a way to sort of create equity in the community, and also to create a surplus And actually what you were just talking about then, Ali, in terms of people feeling part of something, and really adjusting their behavior, that's really interesting, because our project is all about recommoning Bristol. It's about reclaiming the commons, so the spaces that have been lost, but it's also about rebuilding the commons as a sort of social construct and behavior. And so we are identifying the kind of core need to generate surplus to be able to kind of invest in projects and that might be kind of capital projects, but it also might be culture and community building projects. And so the fund that was set up as part of the Dorset project was quite interesting, and seeing the kind of things that it funded. And I wondered, if you set that up as a sort of one member, one vote structure, or is there a panel that kind of decides, is there a criteria? And I'd like to just hear a little bit more about, as we think about these type of projects in capturing the imagination, also the impact that it can have in sort of further generating, this infrastructure and kind of creating more of a kind of a networked infrastructure across a wider area.
Mm-hmm. Really good question. And definitely something that I wanted to bring up later, but as you've raised the issue of the community fund, it's an interesting one. I was actually thinking about it this morning as I was on my walk, thinking about, are we doing the best with that community fund? The situation at the moment is, as I explained, that over time, we generate more surplus because we're paying less interest to members because we pay back some of their capital. And so our community fund gets bigger and bigger over time. What we've done, just from a technical point of view, to stop paying tax on the surplus, is that we have a sister charity. So we covenant the profits that we allocate to the community fund to that charity, and then that charity disperses the funds. And one of the interesting sort of debates we've been having is where the decision making lies, because it's easy then for the trustees of that charity to say, oh well, you've given us the money, so we decide where the money goes. But actually what we really want to do is to say, we've got 205 members of Dorset Community Energy. They're the ones that should be making the decisions really about it. At the moment, the process, I don't think it's ideal. We're fairly well networked within Dorset, with other particularly environmental organisations, and we just invite people twice a year to submit applications for funding. But that comes through to Dorset Community Energy, and those are then fed through to the charity. But we don't do the final sort of decision making. And what I'd like to do is to see whether there are, other more open ways that we could have decision making, through open collective or some other structure that could allow that. The other issue we've had, actually, interestingly, is we've been struggling a bit to get people to apply for the money. And struggling a bit that we're not always just getting applications from the usual suspects, because there are people who know about the fund and apply each year, but there are others that we're not reaching. So there's that other issue as well, I think. So no, it's not something that I feel we've cracked, but it's something that we're aware of. At the moment, the funds that we're able to disperse are quite small, but as it goes on, those funds get bigger and bigger, and so I think it becomes much more of an issue. So it's definitely something that we want to look at. Any other questions about Energy Local Bridport before we go on, just to hear from Monica about the microgrid and the passive house? If not, I shall. Oh yeah, Monica, hi.
I'm sorry, I didn't do it technically, but you got them. You saw my hand. What I'd just like to comment on, you're talking about various benefits of the processes you've been through, so that children learn in the schools about how it affects people, that they can see how it's demonstrated how, you know, how much energy is being generated and how you can impede it and how you can use it more or less. And there seem to be at various other points in what you were saying that there are sort of spin-offs where actually there's a lot of people that are benefiting in different ways, rather than the obvious one that you set out to do. So I'd just like to congratulate you for that. I love that sort of unintended, well, maybe there were intended consequences, but you know, the not obvious consequences of the sort of things that you've been doing.
Mm. Patricia, yes.
Similarly, it's like just because I think when you do these things, like just sharing some of the thoughts, listening to it, and appreciating the way that the ideas you offered at the beginning, Tim, to help think about this, which relates, I think, to what Monica just said, that you know, it sounds very theoretical, like let's change language and subjectivities, but I suppose I've been trying to listen to what you've been saying, and getting a feeling for what that really means to shift a sense of participating in the ebb and flow of energy use in a very concrete way around, and thinking how exciting that is, and also how difficult to involve more people. I mean, I look at us here, which feels disappointingly small number of people. I look at the photographs of the people trying to learn about the grid and what not as a technology, but how it might shift one's sense of being involved in the use of energy, and just realizing how difficult it is to engage this at the community level, and again feeling, wow, you know, you're doing something really important, and really appreciating sharing, you know, what makes the difference to this shift of getting communities to become involved, to become interested, to care. Yeah.
Oh dear.
Hi, apologies, I'd come on the call late, but I was just to add to that point, I was wondering if you were in contact with other similar initiatives that are trying to do similar things. So over the summer, I was in rural Greece, and I met a group of people who have just started an energy co-op, and they were talking in a very similar way of involving the community in trying to match their usage to the generation of energy, and also to trying to shift subjectivities through the cooperative enterprise. So I was just wondering if there were connections being made with similar initiatives, or whether that be a helpful thing to do.
Well, actually, Pete is our best networker, I think, and is actually next week has organised a conference in Bath on local energy systems. I don't know, Pete, if you want to say something about that, and also they're also being inspired by quite a few European examples as well.
Yeah, I'm a member of the International Network for Sustainable Energy, which is like an NGO network based in Denmark. And there are Greek partners. I know there's Electra Energy, I think, in Greece, which has got a very good reputation. Yeah. So, yeah, it's something which is taking place all over Europe. I mean, I was even at the European Sustainable Energy Week in June in Brussels, and one of the speakers from the DG Energy, she was actually the head of the European Energy Directorate, she said, like, within 10 years, anyone in Europe should be able to buy locally generated renewable electricity. And personally, I just think it's so important that we can actually feel that, as Tim said earlier, that we're actually part of the future, that we can actually benefit directly and not be reliant on these major companies that have got a different agenda in terms of profit. And I'm mainly positive, but I do think that it's a matter of urgency. There was a report a few days ago in in The Guardian by some academics, including from one of the London universities, and said basically by 2035, we have to be zero carbon as a world to have a 50% chance of staying within the 1.5 degree limit. 10 years to be zero carbon as a world, it's impossible. So it's going to be difficult. So I just personally feel that we do whatever we can in the current situation. And this is, to me, probably one of the most useful things to get communities, individuals, people feeling, instead of panic, that we can actually learn from each other and do something together, which is actually cheaper than the alternative.
I've put a link in the chat to the event that Peter's organised next week in Bath, which some of you might be interested in as well. So I'm sort of conscious of time, and Monica, would you like to say a few words about Bridport co-housing? I'll share the screen again, and as you know, I've put a few pictures together of it. Let's see. Yeah. Current slide. There you go.
I really rather like that picture. It looks like we've got bluey green roofs. That's really very, very appealing. That it's come on a bit because I think that would have been last winter or autumn. So it's the builders are about to hand over the whole site to us when they managed to get the air tightness sorted in the houses in the bottom, the flats in the bottom right hand corner. I'd like to come in. The angle I want to come in at is that when talking to the planners, in our sustainability statement, we said that we aimed to reduce our energy use by 40% in 5 years. And we weren't sure how we would do that, but I think we figured that there would be two strands. One would be technology helping us, and the other would be behavioral change. And I think the behavioral change is that much easier for us in our organisation because people have willingly signed, well, yeah, they have willingly signed up to a range of statements so that they agree with our aims and goals, and they're aligned with the sort of things that we want to achieve. So that reinforces the behavioral changes. And so when we were approached by our local energy teams about having a microgrid, we did get very excited, I have to say, because this was something beyond what, you know, we had the solar panels on the roof anyway, but this was beyond our what we thought we could achieve. So, and we were very grateful to the help that we got from other organisations and the grants that they raised in order to do a feasibility study on our project. We're saying that it's the biggest co-housing of this type, and this in itself is probably a challenge because co-housing is supposed to be most successful at about 30 homes. But we had all this site, and we didn't want a developer to get hold of it and build, 50 houses on the remaining 2 acres or something like that. So we don't take pride in being big, but because it's a challenge in some ways, but nonetheless, we are delighted for all the families that are now living in houses that they can afford to heat, or they don't need to heat, and houses that are really good quality and they're not very high rents, because this is a problem in Bridport. So,
right.
Yes.
Oh yeah. I just randomly, it wasn't random, but I just added in a couple of slides about the common house, because I think that as we're talking about commons,
yes, indeed,
it just struck me that if commons links to a community and commoning, I think the sort of commoning process that's gone on over the last few months to actually do a self-build of the common house is a really good example of the kind of practices that we're talking about. But I'll move you on to the microgrid. People can come back to the common house.
Yes, I would say that the common house has been even more exciting because we've wanted one for all the time we've been in existence, and we now actually are engaged in working with the encouragement and imagination of local people, and it has been so encouraging. And we had our first meeting inside it on Sunday. We had to wear coats and blankets, but and I suspect I brought a mouse home with me, but I'm not sure about that. I'll have to find out about that. But it the microgrid is actually situated at the top right-hand corner of this slide, because we tried to do self-build, which proved too difficult, and both with the people who might want to live in a self-built house and the planners, it was just too difficult for them to make that step. And what I like, one of the things I like, and what pertains to the sort of things you've been talking about, is that people can relate to this electricity because it's made on their roofs. They've got a battery that is the size of a container on site that they can tell their children about. This is where our energy is stored and passed onto the grid. And personally, I love that physical, that corporeal engagement with the things that are happening around us. I used to live on a boat, and we always needed to know what the tide was doing and what the wind was doing. We moved into a house, we didn't need to know that anymore. We felt very cut off from the wind. And so I just love the idea that having one of those dashboards in one's house and seeing what the wind is doing and how much energy it's generating. I too struggle over what are ohms and amps and all the various terminology around it. And my dad was an electrician, so he might think I ought to know more. But I think that that's all I want to say about the microgrid. But if you've got things to add from what you understand, Tim, please do.
No, I think that's, I mean, I'm sure everyone sort of gets the concept, but yeah, this concept that we're sort of trying to move away from the sort of central generation through a grid to this local generation and storage. I guess there is a sort of parallel with Energy Local Bridport, which is that more energy is generated in the summer. And so particularly in the winter, there will be issues around trying to use the energy, as kind of wisely as possible. And in that sense of sort of that it's shared across the 53 households there, that it's not an unlimited source of energy. So I think that that'll be a sort of a similar issue that the 50 members of the Energy Local Bridport co-op are also dealing with. There's not an unlimited amount of wind that we can sort of spread around. So that'll be sort of one issue. I think the other issue is that the micro.
How you've addressed that?
Yes, sure.
I only found out this on Sunday when we had the meeting in the Common House, because Damon of CPRO, clean energy provider, was telling us that we have bought 25 years of energy from the Scottish wind generator. So that makes us feel sort of like quite snug to know that the provision for wintertime, when I imagine they get even more wind in Scotland than they do in the summertime, has been taken care of. Sorry to jump in, but that was new information to me, so it's sort of
that's great. And I think the complement to that is that the houses have been built to almost passive house standard. And so I don't know if people know passive house, but the idea is that you make a house that's very well insulated and very airtight, so that you're able to keep the heat in the house. It doesn't escape through the windows or the walls, but also you have this quite complicated system, and it's called mechanical ventilation and heat recovery. So basically it sucks out stale air, and that air has heat and it has moisture, and it separates the two. So the moisture is then passed outside, but the heat is recovered and recycled into the house with fresh air that's also come in. So the fresh air that's come in is then heated through the system. And so what that means is each house is using less of the energy that is being generated through the microgrid. So the microgrid, the passive house, and this mechanical ventilation and heat recovery system is sort of complementary. And so that's a kind of a core element to it. So I think, I mean, that was the sort of the main points I think we wanted to get over about the microgrid and the passive house. But I think that, that there's only a handful of these in the country. So, I mean, it's very pioneering for the co-housing project to have taken the leap and to gone down this route. I remember sitting in meetings where we were discussing, did people really want to stop using a gas oven, for example, or, things
Gas
like that,
hob.
gas hobs, yes.
Yeah.
That is quite a shift to move over to only electric. So there were a lot of discussions at that stage. But then when I was on a course with the Common House and talking to one of the other residents who was saying that having just moved in, quite a lot of people are struggling to understand how best to kind of use the technology and to be in their passive house, in the sort of the best way. I don't know, Monica, if you want to say something more about that, but it feels like there is this kind of almost like question, how can we use these systems to best effect? How could we work together to learn how to use them to best effect?
I think that there's a range of responses. Some people are sort of like really keen and they will, they make sure they found out how to do it. Other people are more technically minded and adjust to it. I haven't moved in yet, so I haven't got a personal story to tell on this in this regard. But I think that, just as with passive house, you can't sort of hammer holes in that airtight envelope. So people have to learn to do use different fixings to put pictures and things up on the wall. So that's one aspect. And then the heating is another aspect. So there is learning involved. It's not the same as any ordinary old house. And also there are practices that we're used to that we've had to unlearn. So for example, people were worried that they couldn't open their window, when they wanted fresh air. And we said, well, you probably find you've got fresh air all the time because of the mechanical heat recovery ventilation. I have difficulties getting those letters in when I do them. And so there are a whole range of things we're having to learn. We're also having to learn to work together. Some of us have known each other for a long time and have worked together. We have a lot of newer members who are learning to work with us. Us all work together. So there's a lot of learning going on at the Bristol Co-housing. But then people signed up for that. They knew that this was not a standard product. And also our builders, I think we need to recognise CG Fries, who is a local builder, how much effort they've put into this build, because they know that in future this is what they're going to have to be building. So in a way, they're ahead of the game because they're finding out the hard way in some cases what doesn't work. So it's there's a lot of learning involved in this, but to a good end. And if people have a home that's comfortable and habitable and affordable and warm, then that gives you a lot of incentive to keep understanding it better.
Okay.
Well, I'm also partly picking up a message that Fernanda's put onto the chat about this aspect of learning. And I suppose I was thinking what you said about pioneering, and simply because I've been reading about pioneers in Nebraska, some of the wonderful novels that were narrated the experience of being pioneers. I was thinking about in Devon, the pioneering work of the Elmhurst family at Dartington, and that part of being pioneering is you make terrible mistakes. in the attempt to learn, the commitment, the willingness also produces, you learn. Of course, we forget learning means you make mistakes, you realize, you discover, and that living through that is what built those incredible pioneering communities. And so Fernanda raised the question, like, how early do you begin trying to get funding to create the stories, to film it, to kind of show what is involved in this work, in which grappling with all of this is creating communities, not serving it just. The point that you made, Tim, that this work creates community, doesn't just draw on community. And I just feel that that's an incredibly important part of the work.
I speaking to that from the co-housing experience, is the idea of co-housing is that it's self-designed and managed, and therefore the people coming together to plan what they want and how they're going to achieve it, and then raise the funding, and that in that process, the community is formed. So in our current community, we've got that underlying with the strength of an underlying long-established group of people, and so we're trying to bring encompass a whole new range of people and understand about not alienating them or making them feel lesser because they don't know how to run their heating systems, you know. So, but I appreciate, Patricia, what you're saying about learning. You know, it's I love learning. I realized I'm not that into fun, but I was at a seminar one day and I thought, I love learning. That's my joy. So.
I mean, I guess that was when I first had the idea for the seminar, it was in a sense a sort of a kind of a call out to other CERN members to see if people, are also interested in this issue of energy and, the kind of issues that we were facing with Energy Local Bridport and Dorset Community Energy. And actually, from what Monica, you just said, on the one hand, it could be incredibly important to sort of document that learning process around energy, but it also, that process sits within this wider process that you're all going through of how do you deal with the common house, how do you deal with parking, how do you deal with the growing spaces, all these things. And so, and we're kind of taught to not think about energy. That's kind of like just switch a switch and not think about it. So in a way, the co-housing project is the harder one almost to engage with, but still, as Patricia said, incredibly valuable. And I just wondered whether anyone else had thoughts about, I mean, I suppose, if I were coming to it at this from a purely academic point of view, and I don't see myself as an academic, I see myself as an activist. But I guess if I was coming at it from an academic point of view, I'd say, this is a really interesting opportunity for some action research where resources are given to the co-housing project or to Energy Local Bridport, for example, to generate some joint learning and to capture some of that learning so that it can be then shared more widely. So that was sort of my thought for the session. So I was sort of interested whether other people had ideas about how one might go about that, or if they're already involved in some research on that line.
Not yet, by the look of it.
I guess maybe not quite what you're talking about, Tim, but I was reminded when I was writing the chat anyway about what happened in that consultation for the Atmos project, in which people would, in very kind of really easy to engage in kind of artistic, fun ways, narrate back their lived like histories with the place and with what they did there, and then imagine things together. And I was thinking that something that could like try to capture what was life before co-housing or before joining this community, and what is it now, but in very, yeah, if you could do it in a very kind of like not like interviews only, but like very kind of visual or tactile, you know, like fun, engaging ways, that would be quite good to see as an outsider. You know, like I struggle with documentaries, for instance, and like people start talking, I start like to slowly not pay attention. But when you visit a museum, like it was a little bit, I don't know if you remember this, but they had that kind of exhibition at the Atmos project, and you could visit and then see what people like plugged in and what people wrote and all these things. It was much more interesting.
Mm.
I have no idea how to do that.
No, the Atmos project was it's a kind of redundant building site in Devon, and so the community tried to come up with a plan for a use for that site, and very creative ways were. I mean, I do. Yeah, it's funny. Yesterday, I was looking at some presentations on microgrids, and I couldn't understand any of them. They were all so technical. And I think there's this real danger that on the one hand, you have people who understand and get very excited about the kind of technical, oh, let's have microgrids all over the place. But for 99.9% of people, talk about, you know, load balancing and, you know, all these other things that you're supposed to think about when you have a microgrid. It's kind of incomprehensible. So it is that question, how do you make it accessible? How does this learning become accessible? How do we present energy in a way that, yeah, means something to people rather than just being technical language, I suppose. And I don't know whether there's sort of parallels in other sectors like food or, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I see a lot of parallels in food. I don't know how much this technical part is as big of a hurdle in food. There's something more tangible and intuitive, and like nature grows, and you can mess it up, but you can also not try very hard and be pretty successful with food growing, at least. And but I mean, I've thought a lot about connections to like what has been called these unintended or maybe less obvious benefits of these projects, like social cohesion, that you're actually building community with these projects, not just serving a community, that it's very physical and tangible, that you get that direct connection back to nature that we know is there, but we don't see it all the time. That in food systems, we're also learning to consume when there's abundance, and also learn how to store things, so how to ferment and freeze and dry, and I see so many parallels with, of course, energy there. And yeah, and then this question of inspiring people to care when it's sort of marketed that the easier option is to not do the care work, but to be served your energy or to be served your food, disconnected from seasons and disconnected from community. And yeah, I do see a lot of parallels. It's interesting, this part of the technicalities. I wonder why that doesn't come up as much as the main struggle in food, and I can see why that's a whole nother layer for the energy discussion, for sure.
I'll pick on Sean, and you're doing research around energy, but is that kind of connected to this kind of thing or completely different?
Not really around energy. I'm doing research on humidity, which is group in running democratic assemblies and trying to set up organizations like fertility, food organizations, and squat unused plots and stuff. But Well, they've got some visions for things to achieve
I can't hear.
Yeah, sorry, there's a kind of funny feedback. I don't know.
I can't really hear you, Sean.
No. Right. I don't know if Claudia or Daniel wanted to say anything.
I was just typing it out, but yeah, feel happy to contribute this way. I was just thinking about you know, kind of the parallels really with food growing projects, and thinking that certainly in Bristol and other places as well, actually, that I've been to, they're very good at generating a kind of sense of sort of membership and ownership and participation by having volunteer days, having sort of site visits, be it through events, etc. And I was thinking in terms of energy, how there's a lot that could be learned from the food sector in that sense. Certainly a lot more kind of creative ways to participate, because, you know, whether it's Bristol Energy Network or Bristol Energy Co-op, or, you know, actually Ambitions Lawrence Western in Bristol does quite well. But, you know, the kinds of events and the kinds of way they invite the kind of wider community or the membership in isn't as holistic or as integrated or as participatory as what the food sector has been able to do. Maybe the nature of growing food and its simplicity, and, you know, how innate it is in us going back, you know, generations and generations, has a, you know, a real profound effect there. But I do think that the energy sector, there is a lot of possibility when people put their minds to it, to find ways to get people to help better understand the kind of the practical side of things of what is happening in terms of, you know, how you, it's not even generation, is it? It's kind of harness energy, how you store energy, and I'm just really interested as an educator and also as an activist as well, how that can be done. And that was my thinking, really, just off the basis of what Elaine was saying.
Yeah, I might just add to that quickly. I love that you just brought that up. I was having trouble to find words for it, but something like, where's the feast? Like, we are always having these, like, yeah, harvest feasts, and I'm just thinking, is it a sauna party? Like, do you just feast on the abundance of energy in the wintertime because there was a big windstorm and now you can just heat up a sauna to get, like, I would be really curious to see these exact moments of, like, celebration of abundance and coming together over preservation. I wonder what that looks like.
That sounds like a really, yeah, that's the thing to leave with, I think. We all have to think, what would that look like? Definitely. Well, thank you for everyone for joining. We're supposed to finish at past, but I've really appreciated everyone joining. And I think, Elena, you've put together this Google doc, and so yes, if anybody has any more thoughts, if you click on that, then you can add something to that. I think the session will be on the YouTube channel at some point after the conference. And yeah, if anybody sort of has some ideas, yeah, please do get